The desert had its own kind of silence, not empty, but alive. Every grain of sand seemed to hum with the wind, and every canyon wall held the echoes of something ancient. Red Rock Canyon, stretching endlessly under the early morning sun, looked beautiful and deadly in equal measure. It was here that Mara Ellison, a 29-year-old marathon runner and outdoor influencer, came to test her endurance one last time before her next big competition. Mara wasn't a novice. She'd run through mountain passes, coastal trails, and desert flats across the country. Her social media following had grown because of her relentless energy, humor, and the way she made the hardest trails look effortless. Her tagline, "Chase the Horizon," had become a mantra for thousands of her followers. But beyond the online image, those closest to her knew she carried something else, an almost restless need to push boundaries, to run until the world fell silent around her. On August 4th, 2018, she arrived at Red Rock Canyon Trailhead just before dawn. The sky was still indigo, and the first streaks of sunlight brushed the canyon walls. Her small white SUV sat alone in the gravel lot. She adjusted her GoPro harness, checked her smartwatch, and recorded her usual pre-run clip for her audience. "All right, guys," she said, grinning into the lens, her breath visible in the cool air. 20 miles today. No crew, no backup, just me and the canyon. If I don't make it back by noon, someone come find me." She laughed after saying it, clearly joking. Her followers loved that mix of humor and danger. She signed off with her usual wave, slipped on her earbuds, and started running toward the East Trail, known for its switchbacks and narrow ridges. By mid-morning, the heat had turned brutal. The sun transformed the canyon into a furnace, and the wind carried fine red dust across the cliffs. Mara's last GPS ping showed her about 7 miles in, moving steadily. Then, the signal stopped. At first, no one noticed. Mara had a habit of disappearing offline during her runs. She called it disconnecting to reconnect. Her fans expected her next post by noon, a sweat-streaked, sunlit victory photo. But noon came and went. By evening, her roommate realized something was wrong. Mara hadn't called, texted, or posted. By nightfall, local search and rescue were notified. When rangers reached the trailhead, they found her SUV exactly where she had left it. The doors were unlocked. The keys in the cup holder, 2 unopened water bottles sat on the passenger seat. Everything was in perfect order, except Mara was nowhere to be found. The search began immediately. Teams followed trail markers deeper into the canyon. Drones flew overhead, and dogs combed the narrow paths. But the terrain was unforgiving. Jagged rocks, sheer drops, and twisting ridges made it impossible to navigate after dark. By midnight, the teams had found nothing, no gear, no footprints beyond the 7-mile mark. It was as if the canyon had swallowed her whole. Then, around 2:15 a.m., a ranger scanning the lower basin noticed something half buried in the sand near a dry creek bed. It was Mara's phone, caked with dust, the case cracked but intact. The screen was black, but when charged at base camp, it flickered to life. A single video file appeared. Timestamp, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 47 seconds. The phone had been recording continuously from the moment she began her run until the battery died. At first, rescuers assumed it was just her vlog, maybe something she forgot to turn off. But as they scrubbed through the footage, something felt wrong. The video started normally, Mara running, laughing, talking to the camera. Then halfway through, it turned shaky, erratic, the sound distorted, like wind hitting the mic, or something brushing against it. The last clear frame before the image blurred was Mara turning sharply toward the camera, breathing hard, eyes wide, whispering, "There's someone up there." The rest was static, sand, and wind. By morning, the story had spread beyond Red Rock. Every local outlet carried the headline, "Runner missing in canyon. Phone still recording found in sand." Social media erupted. Thousands of followers posted tributes, prayers, and theories. Some called it a tragic accident, heat stroke, or a fall. Others weren't so sure. The sheriff's office confirmed the phone was being held as evidence while experts extracted the footage. The search for Mara intensified for 2 weeks. More than 100 volunteers joined. Rangers rappelled down cliffs. Divers searched creek beds, and helicopters swept the canyons from dawn to dusk. Still, no trace. The rescue teams began describing the canyon as alive. Radios cut out near certain ridges. Compasses spun without reason, and echoes returned seconds after footsteps stopped, one ranger said later. It felt like the canyon was listening. By the third week, the official search was scaled back. Mara Ellison had joined the long list of disappearances that haunted Red Rock for decades. But unlike the others, hers had proof, 6 hours of footage no one had yet fully seen. Whatever happened to Mara, her phone saw it all. And when the footage was finally analyzed, investigators realized the canyon might not have just taken her. It might have recorded something else. Whatever happened to Mara, her phone saw it all, but no one was ready for what it captured. The search for Mara Ellison became one of the largest rescue operations in Red Rock County's history. For days, teams of rangers, volunteers, and drones combed every ridge and valley of the canyon. The landscape was merciless. Deep cracks split the desert floor. Walls of red stone rose hundreds of feet high, and the heat shimmered like glass by midday before plunging to freezing temperatures at night. Helicopters hovered for hours, their searchlights slicing through darkness. Thermal cameras scanned the cliffs, but detected nothing beyond the usual desert wildlife. The search dogs grew agitated, constantly lifting their noses toward the air as if the scent they wanted drifted above them. "It's like she just disappeared into thin air," one ranger muttered. By the third day, the story was everywhere. News anchors called Mara the fitness influencer who vanished without a trace. Her parents appeared on TV, pleading through tears. "Our daughter is strong. She knows these trails. Please, help us find her." But no one had seen her. No hikers, no campers, no drone footage. Nothing. Her phone, the only solid clue, was sealed under police investigation. Forensics was analyzing the 6-hour recording, but authorities refused to comment on its contents. The silence from investigators only fueled online obsession. Hashtags like #FindMara and #EchoTrailMystery trended globally. Her last Instagram post, the canyon sunrise captioned, "The run begins," became a digital shrine. The comments filled with prayers, arguments, and conspiracies. Some believed she'd succumbed to heat exhaustion or a wild animal attack. Others insisted she'd staged her disappearance as a publicity stunt, but locals whispered a darker tale. One about the Echo Trail. The Echo Trail was a narrow stretch of canyon where voices bounced from unseen cliffs. Hikers swore they'd heard their own names called back to them, sometimes repeating words seconds later, mimicking their tone exactly. Some said the echoes weren't just sound, they were responses. It was this same area where Mara's GPS signal had stopped. Investigators reached the section known as Ridge 7, where her digital trail ended. A few shoe prints, matching Mara's brand and size, led toward the cliff edge, then stopped. There were no drag marks, no slide patterns, no indication of a fall. The sand looked smooth, almost untouched. "It's like someone just lifted her off the ground," one searcher said quietly. Then came the equipment malfunctions. Radios erupted in static. GPS trackers blinked out, and drones lost signal mid-flight. Technicians blamed magnetic interference. But the locals offered another reason. "The canyon doesn't like being disturbed," an old guide warned. "You can shout into it, but sometimes it answers." Despite growing unease, the search pushed on. Divers combed nearby pools for signs of a fall. Rangers rappelled down the ridge. Still nothing. After 2 weeks, officials downgraded the mission from rescue to recovery. It was a bureaucratic word that crushed her family. They refused to give up, launching their own searches funded by Mara's followers online. Nearly a month later, the county sheriff's office made a quiet announcement. The extraction of Mara's phone data was complete. The sheriff described the footage as disturbing, but offered no details. No one outside law enforcement had seen it. That statement only deepened the frenzy. Podcasts dissected every known fact. YouTubers mapped her trail, analyzing sun angles and wind speed from her last selfie. Online sleuths noticed that when Mara turned to the camera and whispered, "There's someone up there," her eyes weren't looking upward, but slightly to the side, as if someone stood behind the lens. Others fixated on the 6-hour recording itself. Experts pointed out that a GoPro battery couldn't last that long in the desert heat. So what exactly had been recording? Her phone? Or something else? Through it all, her parents clung to the hope that the video would prove she was alive. They waited for answers, but weeks passed, and there were none. Then, an anonymous leak broke the silence. A source claimed the audio was more revealing than the visuals, and far more disturbing. The sheriff's office dismissed it as rumor, but it was too late. The story spread. The recording captured something in the canyon: faint laughter, echoing voices, and sounds no one could explain. What began as a disappearance had become a legend. Travelers started leaving flowers at the trailhead where her car was found. Others ventured into Red Rock to retrace her path, some even live streaming the journey. A few claimed they heard their own voices whisper back to them from the cliffs. A missing woman had become a myth, and the truth was finally about to surface. But when investigators finally opened Mara's phone, what they heard in those 6 hours would change everything. When investigators finally unlocked Mara Ellison's phone, the recovered footage was unlike anything the county's forensic team had ever reviewed. The file, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 47 seconds long, began like any other of her vlogs. Bright, confident, filled with that same infectious energy her followers loved. But as the minutes rolled on, that energy shifted into something darker, something no one could explain. The first hour was routine. The footage opened with the familiar tone of Mara's voice, slightly breathless but cheerful. She was running along a ridge bathed in morning light, the GoPro strapped across her chest capturing steady footage of the winding canyon trail ahead. "All right, mile 4, she said between deep breaths, her voice echoing faintly off the cliffs. "It's already getting hot out here, but this view, worth every drop of sweat," she laughed, adjusting the camera angle. Occasionally, she stopped to film the landscape, the sweeping walls of Red Rock, the narrow ridges carved by centuries of wind and rain. She talked about the trail's difficulty, her hydration plan, and the importance of pacing herself. Her tone was calm, focused, familiar. Around the 40-minute mark, she began to comment on the silence. "Weird," she said, glancing around. "I thought I heard, I don't know, something like footsteps? Probably my echo. The canyon's playing tricks." She laughed it off. The audio captured a faint sound behind her, something soft, like gravel shifting under weight. But the camera showed nothing except the vast, empty trail. For the next half hour, she continued running, occasionally speaking to the camera, her breathing rhythmic, her tone upbeat again. But then, at 1 hour 12 minutes and 37 seconds, she stopped abruptly. "Okay, that time I did hear it," she whispered, turning the camera behind her. There was nothing but stone and sun-bleached scrub. She zoomed in toward the bend in the trail, scanning for movement. "Nothing. It's fine," she said finally, exhaling. "Maybe a bird or something small. I'm fine." Her laughter sounded nervous this time. Clipped, she turned the camera back toward herself and started jogging again, the sound of her footsteps steady against the crunch of gravel. By hour 2, the footage showed her entering a narrower section of the canyon. The sunlight dimmed as the walls closed in. She spoke less frequently now, only murmuring occasional comments to herself. When she did speak, her voice echoed back, but not quite right. "Echo check," she joked softly, calling out her name. "Mara," the canyon responded. Delayed, warped, slightly off. "Mara." The repeated word was faint but audible. It didn't sound like her own voice anymore. Deeper, slower. She frowned and called again, louder this time. "Mara." The reply came again, faster than before, overlapping her words. "Mara." She froze. The footage trembled slightly as her breathing quickened. "Okay, that was weird," she said, forcing a laugh. "Sound carries here. It's fine, just echo stuff." But her voice had lost its earlier confidence. The next 40 minutes were a mix of silence and short bursts of commentary. Occasionally, she'd mutter about strange patterns in the rock or how the wind seemed to change direction every few minutes. Several times, she turned her camera over her shoulder, reacting to noises, faint scuffing sounds, almost like footsteps following at a measured distance. "If someone's out here," she called once, "you're really freaking me out." Her voice bounced off the cliffs, fading into nothing. At 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 14 seconds, she paused again, her camera tilted upward, showing a sliver of blue sky between the canyon walls. "There it is again," she whispered. "That sound." This time, the microphone picked it up clearly, a single, distinct crunch of gravel. Behind her, she spun the camera around. Nothing. No animal. No human. Just empty rock. The next few minutes captured her rapid breathing as she jogged faster, her camera shaking slightly. By hour 4, Mara's commentary had become more sporadic. Her once clear voice now came in hushed tones. "It's been too long since I saw a trail marker," she said. "I shouldn't be this far in." She checked her watch. The GPS had stopped tracking. "No signal," she muttered. Of course, she stopped running, scanning the canyon walls. The footage shook as she wiped sweat from her face. Then she turned the camera toward the shadows stretching behind her. "I swear I keep hearing something," she said, "like it's pacing me. Every time I stop, it stops too." There was silence for a few seconds. Then, unmistakably, 2 faint footsteps echoed behind her, perfectly synced with her breathing. She started running again. The video cut intermittently as static bled into the frame. The wind grew louder, distorting the audio. At one point, she muttered, "I think I took the wrong turn. Should have been at the ridge by now." Her words were slurred slightly. Exhaustion setting in. At 4 hours, 37 minutes, and 52 seconds, she stopped once more, crouching low to catch her breath. Her voice trembled now. "There's someone out here," she whispered. "I can't hear them." Her breathing hitched. "Hello?" she called out. "If you can't hear me, say something." A pause. Then, faintly, an echo came back, not delayed, not warped. A voice, nearly identical to hers, answered softly. "If you can't hear me, say something." The phone dropped to the ground. The image spun sideways, showing her legs as she stumbled backward. "No," she gasped. "No, that's not me." The next 30 seconds were chaos, her labored breathing, the camera jerking as she picked it up again, her feet pounding against stone. Then, a sudden, piercing scream, short, sharp, and abruptly cut off by static. After that, the footage changed. For nearly 2 full hours, there was no movement, no voice, just the sound of wind, faint gravel crunching, and something else beneath it. A rhythmic noise like breathing, not close, but somewhere within the canyon, slow, steady, and impossibly deep. When the video finally ended, the last frame showed only red dust shifting across the lens, as if the canyon itself had started to bury the phone. The forensic team sat in silence when the playback ended. No one spoke for a long time. One of the investigators described the experience later in a report. "You could almost feel the canyon watching back, but the final hour of the recording didn't sound human at all." The forensic audio lab that received Mara Ellison's phone footage was used to handling difficult cases. Wind interference, corrupted sound, mechanical distortion, but none of that compared to this. The 6-hour file was intact, yet the final hour was almost unlistenable, static layered with wind, distorted echoes, and something else. A faint undertone no one could quite identify. The first step was cleaning the file. Audio engineers filtered the frequencies, isolating every layer of sound. At first, it seemed normal: footsteps, breathing, gravel crunching beneath shoes, the wind sweeping through the canyon. But as the enhancements deepened, the pattern shifted. Hidden beneath Mara's own voice was another voice, faint and nearly identical, repeating her words seconds after she spoke them. It wasn't just echo. Using spectrogram analysis, the team noticed the secondary voice didn't follow the timing or shape of natural reverberation. Canyon echoes always decayed. Sound waves weakened over distance. This one didn't. The waveform was too precise. As though it were speaking with intent, Mara, one technician whispered during playback, pausing the file. That's not reflection, that's response. They replayed the section where Mara called out, "If you can't hear me, say something." Milliseconds later, the same phrase came back, identical pitch, identical tone. But its waveform was slightly inverted, like the mirror image of her voice. When compared, the data showed something eerie. The returning sound didn't originate from the canyon walls. It came from within the same microphone field, just centimeters from where Mara had been standing. Forensics flagged the anomaly. The official report called it an unexplained mimic phenomenon. Off record, the team referred to it as the second voice. Meanwhile, data analysts were reconstructing Mara's GPS trail, hoping it might reveal where she'd gone after the recording stopped. The coordinates painted a picture that made even less sense. According to the device logs, Mara hadn't been moving through the canyon in a straight path. She'd been looping within the same 1-mile radius for nearly 4 hours. It was as if she'd been running in circles through an area where visibility stretched for miles and no physical barrier existed. Either the GPS malfunctioned, one investigator said, or she was lost in a place that didn't obey its own map. To confirm, rangers were sent to retrace the same path. They used updated mapping drones, tracing every contour of the trail. The results were baffling. Certain areas near Mara's last ping caused the drone's orientation sensors to drift wildly, misreporting their location by hundreds of feet. Compass needles spun unpredictably, something interfering with the magnetic field down there. The ranger captain noted, "It's not normal." That something drew attention back to a decades-old geological survey of Red Rock Canyon. In it, engineers had marked collapsed mining tunnels beneath the eastern ridges, remnants of 1930s excavation efforts. The shafts had long been sealed, considered unstable and forgotten. But one of those tunnels sat directly beneath Mara's final GPS coordinates. A small team was dispatched to investigate. The approach was difficult. Narrow ridges, soft sand, and low visibility from recent storms. By midday, the team found it, a sinkhole no wider than a truck bed, partially covered by boulders and vines. Inside was a drop of 20 feet before the tunnel curved sharply into darkness. At first, it seemed impassable. The air that rose from the hole was damp and cold. Not like desert air at all. It carried a faint, metallic smell. The rangers lowered microphones and recorded for several minutes. The playback chilled everyone present. Faint, almost imperceptible, came the sound of footsteps. Then, a voice, "Hello?" It wasn't anyone from the surface team. Their radio mics confirmed silence. The voice was a perfect match to Mara Ellison's. The team descended carefully. The old shaft was narrow and half-collapsed, lined with rusted timbers and mineral streaks. The deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped. Their flashlights illuminated scratches along the tunnel walls, claw-like marks, shallow but deliberate. Near the first junction, one of the rangers froze. From somewhere ahead, the sound off whispering drifted through the dark. At first, it seemed like the wind moving through the tunnels, but the words were too clear. "If you can hear me, say something." It was the same phrase from Mara's recording. The rangers stood motionless, listening. The whisper repeated, now overlapping itself, as if 2 or 3 voices were saying the same words at once. One ranger shouted into the tunnel, "We're with search and rescue." His voice bounced back in perfect sync, his exact tone repeating from deeper inside. The team immediately retreated, back at base. The audio logs confirmed what they'd heard. The spectral signature of the echo didn't match any natural pattern. It was inverted, just like in Mara's file. The voices in the tunnel weren't reflecting sound. They were copying it. Forensic geologists later confirmed that the tunnels below Ridge 7 formed a labyrinth of sealed chambers. Most of them collapsed. their entrances long hidden by vegetation and time. But what unsettled the team most was how the sound behaved there. Tests showed that any noise made within the tunnels produced distorted repetitions lasting far longer than normal, sometimes minutes, depending on pitch and tone. It was as if the canyon wasn't just echoing, it was recording. Word of the discovery never reached the public in full. The sheriff's office classified most of the findings under environmental anomaly. Officially, the case remained unsolved. File DOS lost due to exposure. Unofficially, rangers began avoiding the area after dark. They said the wind in the canyon sometimes carried voices that didn't belong to anyone. One volunteer described it best in an anonymous forum post weeks later. When you call into that canyon, it doesn't echo back. It answers. The county quietly sealed the tunnel entrance a month later. Concrete was poured over the sinkhole, and warning signs were posted citing unstable ground. But the locals still avoid that stretch of red rock. Some swear they hear faint footsteps on the trail after sundown, always in pairs. Had Mara been followed into the canyon, or was the canyon itself answering her? When the sheriff's office finally released portions of Mara Ellison's recovered footage, they didn't expect what came next. Within 24 hours, the video went viral. It wasn't our enactment. It was her running through Red Rock Canyon, her laughter echoing against the cliffs, the camera trembling in her hand. Millions watched the 6-hour nightmare unfold, piecing together every breath, every flicker of fear, every whisper that shouldn't have been there. Within a week, it had become one of the most analyzed videos in internet history. Forums dissected every frame. Podcasts replayed the audio on loop, and digital forensics experts streamed live breakdowns, trying to separate what was real from what wasn't. But no one could explain the reflection. In the final 40 seconds, just before the scream, viewers began spotting something in the background. At first, it looked like a shadow, but slowed to quarter speed and enhanced. It became unmistakable. Over her left shoulder stood a figure, faint through the dust and glare. Same height, same gear, same ponytail catching the light, and the same face. A mirror image of Mara, standing still while the real one spoke. Analysts argued endlessly. Some said it was a trick of light or a compression glitch. Others swore it was a digital overlay caused by camera heat distortion. A few, those who'd studied Red Rock's acoustics, had another theory. The canyon didn't just reflect sound, it reflected presence. The footage was later taken down at the family's request, but it was too late. Copies had spread everywhere. The internet never let go, just as the canyon never let go of her. Every year since, on August 4th, Mara's parents and friends hold a quiet vigil near the trailhead where her car was found. They bring sunflowers, her favorite, and place them beneath the weathered sign, Ridge 7 Trail. Use caution. Her father no longer speaks publicly. Her mother lights a candle and whispers the words that once opened all of Mara's videos. Chase the horizon. But even now, Red Rock refuses to be silent. Hikers report the same eerie sensation, footsteps pacing them in the sand, always matching their rhythm. When they stop, the sound stops too. One traveler claimed he shouted into the canyon and heard his own voice answer, but a fraction too soon. As if Samething already knew what he'd say, rangers dismiss it as auditory illusion. But locals remember what was found beneath the ridge, the sealed tunnels, the voices that imitated speech. The canyon keeps its dead, one old guide said, and sometimes it keeps the living too. 5 years passed. Red Rock's legend only grew. People came from across the country, took the same trail Mara vanished on. Some out of curiosity, others to pay respect. Most returned with stories of unease, of hearing faint whispers that repeated their words seconds later. Then, in 2023, a runner named Eli Sanders, an amateur ultramarathoner, documented his training along the same trail. On the 4th day, his camera caught something glinting beneath the dust near the ridge's edge. It was a phone. He assumed it belonged to another hiker. The model was old, cracked, sun-bleached, but intact. When he wiped away the dust, The screen flickered faintly to life. The lock screen showed a photo of Mara Ellison, smiling at the camera, sunlight in her hair. The same image used in every missing person report. At first, he thought it was a cruel joke, but when authorities examined it, they found something impossible. The metadata of the last video, titled Run_2 MP4, showed a recording date 3 days before the phone's discovery. 3 days, same trail, same coordinates. The footage was encrypted beyond recovery. All that remained was a short audio fragment. When technicians enhanced it, they heard breathing, followed by a woman's voice whispering into the wind, "Keep running." Then silence. After that, the Park Service closed the eastern ridge, citing unstable terrain. But those who'd followed Mara's story knew the truth. Red Rock wasn't finished. It was still listening, some say on quiet mornings. Before sunrise, you can hear footsteps on the trail, steady, measured, human, and if you listen closely, there's always a second set, perfectly matching the first. Others claim the echo of a woman's voice still drifts through the gorge, calling to no one and everyone, as if running a loop she can never finish. Because some places don't just echo what we say, they remember who we were.